What happens when the husband I mocked for being too calm answers my chaos with a quiet envelope handed to me in public? How far can I stretch the word experiment before the law snaps back and names my behavior plainly? Can a single measured sentence, "I will handle this properly," undo every story I performed for a crowd? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Ligeia Marris, and I told myself I was running an experiment, not breaking a promise. I said tests would make love stronger, that comparison would prove I chose Owen for the right reasons. I said science needed samples, and I laughed when friends asked if I was serious. I told them Owen was too calm, that he hid behind order and lists. I said a little pressure would teach him to show fire. When he asked why I came home late, I said work ran long. When he asked if I was happy, I said happiness needed proof. I called my steps brave and modern, and I called his quiet voice controlling. I told my mother it was growth, and she said reputation mattered. I told myself reputation was only a camera angle. At home, the mugs sat on opposite counters like two small, stubborn people. A spreadsheet blinked open on his laptop with neat rows of initials and dates. A calendar reminder flashed on his phone and disappeared. He said we could talk later. I said later sounded cold. He said he wanted respect. I said respect was boring. I smiled at the mirror and decided I would win the story tonight. I woke to a quiet kitchen and told myself quiet meant control. I said data is clean when the room is clean. I set 2 mugs on the counter, one near the sink and one by the kettle, and I told myself the distance was only habit. The morning light came through the balcony door and made a stripe on the floor. I watched dust drift like tiny notes I could choose to read or ignore. Owen stepped in from the hallway with his phone in his hand. He said good morning in a calm voice. I said good morning in a bright voice. He stood by the table and opened his laptop. A spreadsheet glowed with neat rows that showed only initials and dates. I told myself he was planning work deliveries. I said he loved lists more than people. He did not answer. His phone lit up with a small reminder and then dimmed again. I saw one word flash and vanish. It looked like harbor and a time near the start of the day. He dismissed it with a thumb. I poured water into the kettle and said I had a full schedule and a quick lunch and maybe a rooftop later with Renata. He said we could talk after work. I said later sounded cold. He said respect mattered more than speed. I said speed kept a story from dying. He looked at me for a quiet second and then moved to the printer to check the paper tray. The printer woke up and spit out a single blank page that slid onto the pile like a ghost. I said the printer had a personality. He said machines often showed what they were told to show. I laughed because the line felt too neat. I opened the hall closet to find a charger. On the top shelf, a folder labeled Taxes sat flat under a stack of old mail. I reached up and straightened the edge. Under the folder, a small USB stick was taped in place with a clear strip. A date was written on the side in tiny letters. The date was today. I told myself Owen liked to label old things with fresh ink. I could not pull the tape loose without making a sound. I closed the door and told myself it was nothing. Back in the kitchen, I set his mug beside the kettle out of habit, then moved it back because I did not want to look like I was asking for kindness. He watched my hands and said nothing. I said he was making me nervous with his silence. He said he did not want another argument. I said I was not arguing. I was explaining a plan to test our love. He stood very still, as if stillness could keep the room balanced. I talked faster, like speed could erase the shape of my words. I said tests were common in modern relationships, and I said it was brave to ask hard questions. He asked what kind of questions I meant. I said comparison questions. He asked why my questions happened in places with cameras. I said cameras keep people honest. He said cameras keep people loud. I said loud was not a crime. He said harm did not need a crime scene to hurt. I looked at the mugs again and wished they did not look like two people who did not speak. My phone buzzed. Renata asked if I was still up for a rooftop drink after work. I said yes and sent a smile. She replied with a string of stars and a casual line about brave ideas. I chose to see that as support. I told Owen I would be home late. He said we could talk tomorrow morning if tonight was not good. I said tomorrow was too far away for love science. He closed the laptop and slid it into his bag. The spreadsheet screen winked off like a lid. He walked toward the bedroom, and I followed to the door. The guest bed inside was neat, but the top sheet held a crease that looked recent. The drawer near the desk had a small keyhole. He bent and took something from the drawer, and then turned the key with a soft click. He looked up and saw me watching and said he needed space to think. I said I was not a problem to be solved in a locked drawer. He said he wanted peace. I said peace and silence shaded the same trap. He put the key on his ring. I noticed a new key beside it, small and bright, not worn at the edges. It glinted when he turned. I asked what it opened. He said he was organizing. I said organizing looked like leaving. He lifted his bag and walked past me. At the front door he paused, opened his phone, and a text preview popped up and then disappeared before I could read it. The thread title looked like follow-up. He slipped the phone into his pocket. The door latch clicked. He was gone. I washed the mugs without drinking from them. I told myself I was still the narrator of this day, and that a narrator must not blink when the room blinks. I opened our shared photo archive and scrolled past old dinners and birthday cakes. A new photo sat alone in a fresh folder. It showed the edge of a clipboard on our hallway table. The word at the top was statement. No letterhead. No name. Just the word. I closed the gallery and laughed at myself for seeing meaning in paper. The laugh sounded thin. I decided the day needed strong moves, not thin laughs. At the co-working hub, I arrived early and walked the open floor like I belonged to the brand. I said hello to the front desk. I placed a sample box on my station, as if I had conquered a mountain. Renata came in with her hair up and her phone ready. She gave me a look that said news. She showed me a short clip from last weekend on the beach promenade. It was only 8 seconds. It showed me laughing too close to Crispin while we walked with the crowd. A stranger's hand held a phone low, and the scene looked stolen. In the background, a child laughed and a small dog barked. Nothing terrible happened in the frame. The tone did the work. Renata asked if Owen had seen it. I said Owen knew I was researching The Shape of Love. Renata lifted her brows in a way that asked if I heard myself. I said context would fix tone. She said the internet loved tone more than context. I said I would post a careful explanation tonight. She told me to ask our manager for advice before posting anything. I said managers make everything boring. She nodded toward the glass hall. Ms. Fenn stood there and gestured for me to come by later. Renata typed a note on her phone and then typed something else, and then erased it. I watched the backspace move across the screen like a small eraser on a chalk line. Around noon, I took my lunch at my desk and wrote a short note that framed my tests as modern courage. I put the word experiment in quotes in case people needed softer edges. I wrote that Owen and I communicated deeply and that comparison made choice more honest. I read the note back and felt a strange chill. I deleted the last paragraph and replaced it with a joke about charts. A colleague 2 desks over glanced at me and then turned his phone face down. A courier walked into the lobby and asked the receptionist something in a low voice. The elevator bell dinged twice. My stomach did a small drop and then settled. I walked to the kitchen for water and past a glass door where my reflection looked like a person giving a tour she had not been asked to give. I told myself confidence is a coat and anyone can wear it if they keep moving. I returned to my chair and told Renata I would meet her on the rooftop after work. She said, "Okay," but she also said to bring a soft drink and leave the speeches at home. I laughed because I did not know how to leave speeches at home. The afternoon dimmed toward evening, and the city through the windows looked like a set. Door latch clicks as a text preview titled, "Follow-up blinks and vanishes" on his phone. I left the office with a bright smile and a fast walk. The rooftop bar sat above a small hotel near the water, and the sun broke between clouds in a streak that looked like a promise. I chose a table near the rail where the wind moved drinks a little and made hair feel alive. Renata arrived with 2 colleagues from another floor. Crispin came later, dressed like a person who believes mirrors will always be kind. He said the view was perfect. I said the view would carry the night. He slid into the chair beside me with easy confidence. I did not move away, because moving away would admit that the first clip had teeth. Music from a small speaker floated through the air like a confident whisper. People lifted phones to the sky and then turned them inward, half the city in one glass rectangle. I took a photo of the light and sent it to Owen with a note that said the sky was trying hard for us. He did not reply. I told myself he was working late. I told myself his silence was strategy to make me panic, and that I would not panic because I was the one with the plan. Renata asked me to keep things light. She said people were watching and that I could help myself by stepping back from the edge. I said the edge was where the air felt clean. She shook her head. A group nearby started to ask for a toast. They wanted something casual, something brave, something about summer even though it was not summer. I said I could do brave because brave was my word. I stood and raised my glass. The wind pushed my hair and the sound softened, then swelled as the group leaned in. I said we were all testing who we were after a long season of small rooms. I said tests showed us what we did not want to admit. I did not look at Crispin when I said it. Phones went up. A tiny red light on one of the phones turned on and stayed on. I told myself the light did not matter. Crispin touched my sleeve with 2 fingers like a punctuation mark. I kept my arm steady and let the gesture pass. The crowd cheered without thinking what they were cheering. I heard my name drift from a second table like a soft dare. I realized then that the rooftop was only part of the night, and that people would move to the promenade to walk along the water and film new angles. I decided to control that part too. I told the table we should take a stroll and show the city our best side. Someone laughed and said I was brave again. The word brave had lost its edges. We went down the stairs and out into the street. The promenade was full of couples and small groups, all holding screens like lanterns. A stranger with a cap walked behind us with his camera close to his chest. I did not like his angle. I tried to step left. Crispin stepped left too, as if we were in a dance. I told him we should look like a joke, not a scene. He said the line between jokes and scenes was thin and fun. I said thin lines needed careful feet. He grinned at a woman passing by, and the woman looked at me like she could see through every word I had said all week. My phone vibrated. A banner slid up. It showed a calendar alarm I did not remember setting. It read, "Paper drop, 10:05 a.m., even though it was not morning. I stared at it for a second, and then it vanished. My chest felt tight for no clear reason. Renata saw my face and asked if I was okay. I said I was fine and that the city air was strong. We reached a stretch of rail where the light from a shop made a bright patch on the ground. People gathered and began to ask for another toast, a small one, a silly one, a brave one again. They lifted their phones to capture a repeat of the rooftop mood. The tiny red recording light on the capman's camera came on and stayed on. I felt the world turn a small notch forward. I lifted my glass because I believed if I controlled the shape of the toast, I could control the shape of the story that came next. Back at the co-working hub the next day, the rooftop and promenade clips moved like slow smoke. Renata told me to leave the reels alone. She said HR wanted to check in. Ms. Fenn sent me a message to stop by. I told myself it was about the launch calendar, not about clips. In the HR room, the chairs were soft and the walls were plain. She asked about my workload and my well-being. I said both were fine. She said there were public tags involving me and a regular guest of the building. She asked that I remember brand guidelines. I said the tags were jokes and that context would fix tone. She said context often arrives too late. I left the room with a smile that felt like tape. Afternoon slid toward the end of the day. People moved in and out of the elevators with the same faces as always, but with slower eyes. A junior stopped by my desk and asked if the rooftop was fun. I said it was windy and silly. He nodded like he had expected that answer. My phone buzzed. A message preview from a thread named Follow-up flashed and vanished again. I felt a small drop in my stomach. A courier waited by the lobby desk with a stack of neutral envelopes. He checked his watch. He looked bored. The elevator bell dinged. The sound felt bigger than the room. I told myself everything was still manageable if I kept my tone low and my steps even. I typed a short line to Owen that said we should talk tonight. The message showed as delivered. It did not show as read. Manager requests a quick word at 4:20 p.m. as the elevator bell dings and a courier waits in the lobby. I told myself crowds could clean a story, so I leaned into the rooftop night and let the wind smooth the edges. The sky held a dull glow, and the rail hummed with small laughter. I took an empty chair at the center table and set my phone face down like a person with nothing to hide. Renata sat across from me and kept her voice low. She said the clip from the promenade had more views. I said views were only numbers. She said numbers shape meetings. I said meetings could be shaped back. Crispin arrived with a bright grin and a slow walk, as if he owned the breeze. He said we should make a fun moment. I said the word fun had rules. He said rules were for offices. I smiled because the table wanted me to smile. Glasses clinked. Someone with a small camera stood near the planters and tested angles. The red record light blinked and then stayed on. I told myself the light did not change anything. I sent a photo of the sunset to Owen and typed that the city was generous tonight. The message showed as delivered. It did not move to read. Music from a small speaker wrapped itself around our chairs. People began to ask for a toast. They wanted easy courage, short words, a posture that said we could breathe. I stood because standing was easier than explaining why I would not. I said we were all figuring out how to love after long months of strange habits. I said pressure was a mirror. I kept my tone gentle and short. Phones rose like small moons. From the corner of my eye, I saw the man with the camera tilt his wrist so the lens could see my hands as well as my face. Crispin brushed my sleeve with 2 fingers, the way people do when they want the picture to guess a story. I did not pull away. I held my glass steady. Renata watched me with a flat look that asked me to stop performing. The chant for a second toast started at a second table. The air felt crowded with want. I told myself I could step back and still look in control. I shifted half a step. The crowd shifted with me, as if I had pulled them by a string. After the toast, groups began to move toward the stairs. I said a walk along the water would cool us down. The others agreed because the city looked soft and wide from below. On the promenade, lights lay across the pavement in long strips. A vendor turned a sign and called out a joke. We laughed because laughter keeps groups together. Crispin matched my pace and kept his shoulders close. He said comparison was a good teacher. I said comparison could be clean if everyone agreed. He said agreement was flexible. I did not like the word. A couple walked by and glanced at us, then at their phone, then back at us again. I felt my jaw go tight and kept smiling anyway. I felt my watch buzz. A calendar bar slid up on the face and then disappeared. I read only the last word. It was personal. I thought about Owen's morning reminders and the blank page in the printer tray. I thought about the USB taped under the taxes folder with today's date. I told myself I was reading too much into small things. I told myself not to look down the tunnel of possible meanings. The cameraman stayed a few steps behind us with a steady arm. He did not smoke. He did not joke. He only followed. I told myself to pivot and take control. I said we should stop for a group photo by the rail. I said I wanted the water in the frame. People crowded in again. Phones rose. Red lights woke. The sound of the crowd grew grainy and warm. Renata came close and whispered that we should go home. She said the internet was not a friend tonight. I said I owed the group one more laugh. She did not smile. I lifted my glass again and gave a tiny speech about honest tests. I said I was brave enough to face results. I heard myself and felt the ground move under the words. A stranger at the edge said my name and asked if I was the one from the clip. His tone held no malice. It held curiosity, which was worse. I gave him a small nod and turned away. I felt the circle tighten again. Crispin raised his glass like an anchor. He said the city loved brave women. The man with the camera adjusted his focus and lifted his chin for a better angle. The heater near the wall clicked on, and the metal expanded with a soft pop, like a tiny firework. I looked at the water and thought about kitchens. I thought about our mugs on opposite counters, and our guest bed looking ironed instead of lived in. I thought about Owen's face when he chose not to argue. I tried to picture him raising his voice and could not. I tried to picture him doing anything foul and could not. I pictured only neat hands, lists, and careful steps. I felt a small tear in my certainty. I covered it by laughing at nothing. The crowd laughed with me because crowds do that when they have decided to trust a performer. I told myself I still held the thread. I told myself the thread would not cut my fingers. A police siren groaned somewhere far off, then faded. A ferry horn pushed across the water. For a breath, the city felt like a living lung. I saw Renata type something on her phone and then lock the screen as if the message had frightened her. A breeze lifted the hair at the back of my neck. I turned toward the camera and thought about angles. I lifted my chin because angles can suggest innocence. The man with the camera did not move. His red light kept watching me like an eye that does not blink. When we walked back toward the hotel, I checked my phone and found 2 new tags with my name. One showed the rooftop toast. One showed the promenade smile. Both were short. Neither was explicit. Both were pointed. I told myself tone would burn hotter than truth for a day and then go out. I told myself tomorrow I would post context with a soft taste. I told myself Owen should have replied by now. I sent him a short line that said we should talk after dinner. It stayed on delivered. I put the phone in my bag. I kept my back straight all the way down the stairs. In the morning, the clips had grown legs. They moved into group chats I did not know. Renata told me not to look at comments. I looked anyway. The comments were soft at first, then sharp, then soft again. The softness felt like pity. I preferred the sharpness. HR sent a request to swing by with no tone in the words. I walked into the small room and sat in a comfortable chair and spoke about workload and timelines. Ms. Fenn listened and then mentioned brand standards. She asked if everything at home was okay. I said we were good and curious. She said curiosity was not a shield. I said I understood. She asked me to avoid being the subject of office gossip. I said I would try. I left with a steady face. My hands shook in the elevator, so I crossed my arms to press them still. When I reached my desk, a junior set a folder down and asked if the rooftop was fun. I said it was light and silly. He nodded as if I had given the right answer in a small test. I opened my laptop and tried to work. I could not focus. I opened the shared photo album to distract myself and saw a new image. It was our hallway again, the clipboard again, the same top word again. Statement. No letterhead, no seal, just the word. I closed the album and put my head down for 3 breaths. My phone vibrated. A thread named Follow-up blinked a preview and then took it away. I stared at the blank screen and told myself blanks were neutral. The elevator bell dinged in the lobby. A courier spoke to the receptionist. The room seemed to lean as if a train were passing nearby. I picked up my bag. I walked to the door. I told myself to keep moving as if nothing had changed. A crowd chant for a toast swells while a recording light stays on. Tags appear with her name as an elevator bell dings in the distance. I wanted the family to see calm, so I arrived early at the restaurant and asked the host for the long table by the window. The tablecloth was clean but thin. The menus showed fingerprints from other meals. I wiped my side of the table with a napkin even though I knew it did nothing. Silas and Petra came first. Silas asked about traffic. Petra asked about my dress and then lowered her voice to ask if any posts needed to come down. I said the posts were jokes. She said jokes are not policy. I smiled and said I had it. Owen came with Marla and Nico. He pulled a chair for Marla and asked the server for extra water. He looked at me and nodded once. His face was calm. There was no heat in it. The lack of heat scared me more than heat would have. We sat. Plates arrived. The sound of cutlery filled the space where conversation should have gone. I told a small story about how a shipment of notebooks went to the wrong floor, and everyone wrote welcome on the first page. The story was clean and human. It should have landed. It did not. A cousin arrived late and placed a phone on the table. The lock screen showed a still from the promenade. She turned the phone face down, then back up, then down again. The table sound changed in a soft wave, like a room taking a breath together. No one yelled, no one made a speech, they only slowed. Marla asked me how work was. Her voice was soft and level. I said work was steady and the launch was near. She nodded and asked if I was sleeping enough. I said sleep was a choice. I heard how that sounded and wished I could pull it back. Nico played with a spoon and watched me with clear eyes. He asked me if I wanted to make Uncle Owen sad. He asked it in a simple way, like asking for more water. I said I wanted to make us strong. He said strong and sad did not look the same. He went back to his spoon. It felt like the whole table had heard a small bell. The server brought a cake for another table and the room clapped without knowing why. In our corner, Petra tried to get ahead of the air and suggested a family photo before dessert. People stood and arranged themselves in a shape. I stood too. Owen moved to the side and made space for elders. Someone suggested I stand next to him for the picture. He stepped aside so the older aunt could stand between us. It was a polite move. It was a boundary. The photo happened without comment. We sat again. My father told a story about a neighbor's lawn. The server asked if anyone wanted coffee. I raised my hand to prove I was normal. It felt like I had raised a flag. No one saluted. After the meal, we walked to the community center hall for a birthday gathering. The room was bright and smelled like floor cleaner and frosting. A microphone stood on a metal stand near a folding table. A relative asked for a few words before the candles. People turned toward the stand and then toward me, because I had been the person with words in other rooms. I walked up, because walking back would look worse. I said, families hold each other up during noisy weeks. I said we forgive more than we post. I meant it as a balm. It sounded like spin. The microphone squeaked in a small feedback cry. Someone from the back raised a phone and filmed. A second person filmed from a different angle. I saw the red circles of record in both lenses. My mouth went dry. I kept the speech short. The clapping was thinner than the sound of frosting being cut. Marla moved beside me and asked if I needed a ride later. The question was small and full of care, and also full of meaning. I said I was fine. She said she meant the offer. I said I understood. She touched my shoulder once, like a curtain being moved carefully. A cousin at the snack table showed a clip to another cousin with the brightness turned down low. The second cousin watched, then looked at me, then looked away. My chest felt tight and high. I asked Owen if we could speak outside. He said we could speak another time. I said another time sounded like a closed door. He said he had made no threats. I said silence was a kind of pressure. He said silence could be a kind of safety. His words were plain and heavy. He did not raise his voice. He did not make me small. He made himself steady. On the way home, I took the metro because I needed to sit alone. The car was half full. The window showed my face over a dark tunnel. I practiced lines under my breath without moving my lips. I said I had been brave and foolish, and that both could live in one person. I said I would delete the posts and ask for a reset. I said I would invite him to dinner and leave my phone in a drawer. The train rattled. An ad for storage units slid by, then an ad for a notary. The pair made a cold joke I did not like. My phone buzzed. A text preview flashed from a thread named Follow-up. It vanished before I could read it. I pressed my thumb to the glass and saw only my reflection. I put the phone away and gripped the pole with my other hand until my knuckles felt smooth. At home, I opened the door and smelled a faint trace of toner, like warm paper. The apartment was neat, too neat, like a stage before the actors enter. On the kitchen counter, 2 mugs stood far apart. On the wall planner, a red circle held steady around Friday. I tried to remember what Friday meant. I could not. In the bedroom, a drawer clicked as I stepped in. I did not touch the handle. I walked back to the kitchen and set a plate on the table and stared at the empty chair across from it. I thought about buying flowers and then decided the vase would look like a prop. I stood very still. I waited for the elevator in the hall to hum. I waited for keys at the door. I waited for anything that sounded like the day could go backward. My phone vibrated and showed a missed call from a private number. I did not return it. I could not carry another voice. I opened the balcony door for air. The curtain moved like a slow breath. Down in the parking area, our car faced the street, not the wall. The position felt like a sentence. I told myself I was being dramatic. I closed the door and leaned my head against the glass. The laptop on the table woke and showed a tidy desktop with 2 neat folders, Archive A, Archive B. A small cloud sync window flashed and then disappeared. I reached for the lid. I stopped. I told myself I would talk to him without screens. I told myself I would confess that experiment was a mask. I told myself I would ask him not to leave. Marla delivers a quiet warning: kindness is not weakness. While at home, the faint smell of printer toner drifts, and a cloud sync pop-up blinks and disappears as footsteps pause outside the door. I went to the pharmacy because I needed a task I could finish. The line was slow and smelled like rubbing alcohol and hand soap. I picked up a box of vitamins I did not want and held it like a promise. A small screen above the counter showed a loop of quiet news with captions. The words looked like they might be about me even though I knew they were not. A woman in front of me opened her phone and scrolled past a clip with my name under it. She tilted the screen away when she felt me looking. I told myself strangers did not matter. I told myself tone could still be changed. My phone buzzed. A missed call from no caller ID sat on the screen like a pebble. I let it sit. A child coughed. Someone tapped a card. The line moved. I paid for the vitamins and walked out into air that felt heavier than the store. At the supermarket, I placed bread and pasta on the belt. The cashier asked about my day. I said it was busy and I would cook something simple. The cashier nodded and did not ask for more. Behind me, 2 young men laughed at a phone. The sound held my name for a second and let it go. I took the bag and walked home fast. On the landing, I paused because I heard a small mechanical sound. It was the sound of a drawer turning its lock with care. I slid my key into our door and stepped inside like nothing had changed. Jonah stood by the table with his jacket half on. The laptop screen was dark. The wall planner near the balcony still held its red circle around Friday like a patient eye. I said I could cook early. He said he had plans. I asked if he wanted to talk first. He said he did not want to repeat the same talk. I told him I would delete the tags. He said the internet was not the only place where things lived. I told him I was scared and needed a path back. He said he was done arguing. He said he wanted respect and quiet. I said I could give quiet if we decided to stay. He said he would handle matters properly. The word properly landed like a lid on a pot. I asked what that meant. He said later would show it. He took his keys from the bowl. I saw the new, unfamiliar key flash on the ring like a small tooth. He put on his jacket. I reached out and then set my hand on the counter instead. He thanked me for asking to talk and said he was going out for a while. I said he was making a scene by being calm. He said calm was his choice. He stepped to the door and left without slamming it. I stood very still. The printer in the corner woke and spit a single blank page. I picked it up and held it to the light as if words might grow. Nothing did. I set the paper down and opened the laptop. A clean desktop showed two neat folders named Archive A and Archive B. A small cloud sync notice blinked in the corner and disappeared. I closed the lid quickly and told myself I should not look. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder I did not remember adding. It read Atrium, 6:45 p.m. I dismissed it and tried to breathe the way apps suggest. On the kitchen counter, two mugs stood far apart like two people who only share a room. I moved mine closer to his and then moved it back. I needed to walk. I took the stairs to the parking garage and felt the air cool as I went down. Our car faced the street straight and ready, not tucked against the wall as usual. The shape said decision without saying where it led. I touched the hood with my fingertips as if a car could answer. Footsteps came down the ramp and paused, then went on. I listened until the sound faded. I went back up and set the table out of habit. Pasta, bread, 2 plates, no flowers. I checked my phone. Renata had written a long message and then deleted it. Only a single line remained that said, "Please stop performing." My mother wrote that reputation was a house with many windows. My father wrote that I should delete everything and be humble. I put the phone face down and stared at the door. A little later, Jonah came back. He washed his hands at the sink and thanked me for dinner. He ate politely. When we were done, he thanked me again and said he would be out tomorrow. I asked where. He said he had an errand. I asked if we were okay. He said he would handle it properly. He took his jacket and left again with the same even steps. I stood in the doorway and watched the hall. I heard the elevator hum. The printer cooled and made a small ticking noise. The apartment smelled faintly like toner. I told myself I still had one more move. I would go to his building tomorrow and speak plainly. I would stand in the bright lobby and talk about respect. I would promise to pull the clips, then pull them. I would take the experiment word apart and throw it away. I built the speech in my head and practiced the opening. The hook triggered as he said the line. He would handle it properly. And the calendar on my phone pulsed the words, meeting, personal, and then hid them again. I chose the office tower lobby because it was bright and clean and everyone used their quiet voices there. I arrived early and stood near the revolving doors with my hands folded in front of me like I belonged. The floors were polished and made small echoes when people crossed. A florist's cart sat outside the glass with a few tall stems. I thought of buying one for my hand and decided against it. A concierge with a name tag that said, Pexton looked up and asked if I needed help. I said I was meeting my husband. He said the lobby was open for waiting and went back to his ledger. I watched the doors turn and counted breaths in groups of 4, because counting felt like control. I saw Jonah through the glass before the doors opened. He walked with the same steady posture he used in every hallway. He stepped into the lobby and said my name in a level tone. I began my speech. I said I was sorry for tone. I said I would pull every clip. I said I understood respect differently now. I said comparison was an old fear, not new courage. I said I had been hiding inside a word. He listened without flinching. He said public scenes were not useful. I said this was not a scene. I said I wanted to show I could be calm in public like him. A person in a neutral jacket walked up from the left. The person asked me to confirm my full name. I confirmed it because the question seemed simple. The person said a short formal line about delivery. A neat envelope changed hands. It felt heavier than paper. I looked at Jonah and said this was too much. He said he was following the proper path. The person in the neutral jacket explained in even words that I had been served. The concierge wrote down the time in neat ink. 2 people by the elevator stopped talking and watched without moving. I slid the papers open just enough to understand the shape. The words were clean and cool. There were temporary orders about the apartment, about when each person would be inside, about money held steady, about how we would speak to each other while decisions were made. There was a line that suggested a schedule for later choices if family plans changed one day. There was nothing cruel in the language, only structure. I said we should go upstairs to talk. He said downstairs was fine today. I said we should be alone. He said we could meet later in a place that made sense. He thanked the concierge for patience. He thanked the neutral person for the clear explanation. I said I would delete everything tonight. He said I could do what I thought was right. I asked if the papers meant goodbye. He said they meant process. A soft bell sounded as an elevator opened. I felt the floor under me grow steadier, not safer. I could not force my face into a smile. I could not make my hands do anything smart. A message from my manager slid across the top of my phone. We should connect first thing Monday. I did not answer. I looked at the florist's cart outside as it turned a little in the wind. I thought a flower might look like a joke now. I told Jonah I could still be brave in a better way. He said bravery was not needed, only respect. He took a step toward the doors. I took a step after him and stopped because the neutral person had stepped aside and left a clear space I did not know how to cross. Mr. Pexton closed his ledger with a soft tap. A new pair of visitors entered and lowered their voices when they saw my face. I held the envelope against my ribs like it could keep me standing. Jonah nodded once to the room, not to me. He pushed the glass. The revolving door took him into the bright day with a smooth turn. The lobby collected his footsteps and let them fade. I watched the door spin and slow and settle. The result landed inside the quiet. Temporary orders were in effect now. I felt the shape of them without reading every line. I stood where I was because moving would make a sound. The hook triggered as the envelope warmed in my hand, and the elevator bell chimed again behind me, while the doors closed on his back in the bright glass. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.